me, not Australian dollar, but the Middle East version or UAE version of stable coins. They're backing it with their bonds and treasuries. And then, David Schwartz at the end, I was kind of sad I had to hop off there. I love doing this, but I always loved listening to David Schwartz talk too. And to hear him talk about, how excited banks and institutions are to be able to reduce cost by using this technology it's great to see, right? Because he thought, like, all of us that are in this space and spend time learning about it and what it is and how it improves efficiencies and all that, like, that's what we geek out on. Banks don't really care. They care about making more money. Like, that is their job. So any way that they can cut costs and increase efficiency and clip more basis points, that is appealing to them. And utilizing this network and this asset and stablecoins on it allows them to do those things. Like money being idle overnight or over weekends or, on holidays. Like we've got, Monday this week, we have President's Day. If you could be making payments, if you could be, clipping additional yield during that time, they want to be able to do that. They want to be able to operate 24/7, 365 without having that money just sitting idle somewhere. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, right? Like a couple days over the weekend and maybe the holidays, the bank holidays, there's 10 of those per year. I mean, but that really adds up. I mean, you've got 52 weeks in a year. So 2 days out of each one of those weeks, money sits idle in the bank. It's not doing much. And then you've got the 10 other holidays. So we're looking at, let's call it 52 times 2. We have 104 plus 10. We're 114 days. Almost like not quite a third of the year, but pretty close to like a third of the year where their money's sitting idle, not working for them. And then you've got also downtime over the evenings, right? So you could probably get closer to maybe 2/5 of the year that money's just sitting idle. It's not being used, it's not being moved, it's not making payments, it's not generating revenue for these companies. And if you were able to get that back, like, you think about it, you sleep 6 to 8 hours a day. You have to do that to maintain your health and be able to have functioning brain and all the other stuff that we have to have. But if you had some way to be able to leverage that time, I mean, that's 1/3 of your life that you get back. 24 hours in a day, 8 hours you're spending sleeping. If you're taking that much time, I don't, but most people do. Then, I mean, imagine how much more productive you could be with that idle time. And banks and institutions see the same thing with this asset and these networks and what they're going to be able to do with it. The last thing that David Schwartz was talking about before I hopped over here was, opposition to adoption of this asset class and why they've seen such friction with the banks. And, aside from the regulatory component, which we're still working on, and I think we will get resolved here in 2026, he said the volatility in the asset, even if some people are okay with it, at scale, banks are just not okay with holding a volatile asset. And they're working on solutions and ways to be able to hedge that volatility or only have them hold it for a short period of time in order to be able to make a payment, like with ODL and the product that they brought to market there. But people still have some opposition to that. So I am an advocate and believe that we will see a significantly higher price for XRP, and it'll operate very similar to like an index on the stock market. It takes billions of dollars in inflows or outflows into indexes for them to move quarter basis point. They're very stable once there's enough liquidity in an asset or a market. And the more liquidity they have in XRP, the higher the price of the token is, the more stable that value will be and the more adopted it will be by these institutions. So I believe, the regulatory clarity component with the Genius Act, we have that out of the way. And we will have, the Clarity Act likely this year in 2026 that also changes the game as far as the adoption rate for all the things that are going on. Should have got me some water. Actually, I have one over there. Maybe we'll grab it. So, that's where things are at. Really exciting times. Market sentiment is at an all-time low. Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index is at 5. Like, this is the lowest sentiment I have seen literally ever. If you look at the Google Analytics for people that are looking up crypto right now, they're lower than they were after the Terra Luna crash, and FTX and Voyager and Celsius in 21 or 22. It is obliterated. Like, if you're still here, you are buying, or at least in the market at a time where sentiment is completely opposite of fundamentals in the market. We're seeing, again, institutions leaning in. I was just here in New York last week for the Ondo Summit, and every large institution, Franklin Templeton, Citi, Goldman, BNY, you name it, they were there talking about how they're going to be leveraging this technology inside of their own infrastructure, and then also how it's going to revolutionize markets here in 2026. And yet people are scared. People are fearful. We were way down in the price. So, my favorite quote, and I think Brad Garlinghouse said this the other day as well. He said, Warren Buffett, one of his famous quotes is, be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. There's never been more fear. We are literally the lowest it's ever been in the market for fear right now. So if there was ever a time to be greedy, again, it's probably a good time for my disclaimer. Not a financial advisor. I can't give you financial advice. I'm only here for entertainment and educational purposes. If you need financial advice, reach out to a wealth manager, a financial advisor, and they can help you with it. If you need somebody that, deals with crypto, you can reach out to Digital Wealth Partners. They are really the only RIAs in the world that will provide you financial advice when it comes to allocating toward crypto in your portfolio. You can just go to digitalwealthpartners.net. So, all that being said, though, again, fundamentals, all-time high, and you've got sentiment at an all-time low. I think we're at an inflection point. I think that the Clarity Act should get, put toward the Senate here in the near future. They had the markup and it got through. None of the Democrats voted for it. And so if we do make it to midterms and we don't have it across the line and the Dems do get in and can take control of the House or the Senate, we might not even see the Clarity Act this year, which would be detrimental. Ripple is a huge advocate for, a multi-chain future. One of the other things that Jack and Lauren were talking about is wrapping XRP on other blockchains or how it's interacting in those ecosystems. And that's how they kind of determine where they should be launching RLUSD. They just launched on a couple other L2s on Ethereum, Arbitrum, and some of the other networks they're issuing RLUSD on. The ecosystems that are adopting XRP as collateral or using it in some capacity in DeFi is where they're spending their time and where they're issuing RLUSD. And there's a synergistic component between Ripple's RLUSD and XRP. It's kind of an infinite feedback loop, and they work extremely well together to be able to settle value and payments. Same thing with other stable coins as those are issued, and Ripple works with other counterparties to get those to market. You're going to continue to see the adoption of XRP because, again, they stated it again today. It is at the core of their business, and I was super excited for them to host XRP Family or Community Day. And get up there and kind of explain to everybody. Because again, like these acquisitions, people hear that and they go, okay, that's cool, but I really don't know what that means. If you don't understand prime brokerage and how derivatives work and the lending and what they're doing with the collateral there, it sounds ambiguous. You really don't have a concept of what that means for the market and the adoption of this asset. And then, G Treasury, like that was huge. Because again, of all the things I just mentioned, idle capital is not earning money during that duration. If they're able to hold RLUSD and participate in a money market or be able to move from tokenized deposits into a money market and back and forth, and it's ubiquitous and liquid 24/7, 365, you're able to aggregate a lot more value and generate a lot more value and also reduce fees and costs that you had in the other system. So why wouldn't you adopt that, right? Pivotal year in 2026. And I think we're, on the precipice. And that was another thing. I think I mentioned this on the Monday live, but we had Paul Adkins talking on a news network earlier this week, talking about the tokenization of the back end of the stock market, and that we were right on the cusp of that taking place. That will happen before they tokenize stocks. You need instant settlement on the back end between the clearinghouses and the brokers to be able to settle real time T0 or T+0 versus T+1, which is what we are today. before they implement the tokenization of the stock market. And they said that they were going to tokenize the stock market in the latter half of this year, so after Q2. Again, hopefully the Clarity Act will get passed. Robinhood also diving in here, creating their own blockchain to be able to tokenize stocks and things there on their exchange or their brokerage. Many of them are leaning in here, including NASDAQ, NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, Texas Stock Exchange launched this year. They'll be doing ETFs first, and then toward the latter half of the year, probably Q4, launching actual tokenized stocks themselves. And I think that's what Robinhood was looking at. I think the progression will be they'll tokenize ETFs or the larger cap stuff, and then they'll move to individual stocks as they move on. But again, first order of business is back-end settlement and real-time clearing for the DTCC. And I think that might coincide with a little bit of price appreciation on certain assets that people hold that might be listening to this. All right, we'll go ahead and jump into the questions here. Again, appreciate you taking time out of your Monday to come hang out with me. Maybe you're listening to David Schwartz and me. I don't know if he's still on there on Twitter, but I think that'll probably run for maybe another 15 minutes here. Again, always enjoy listening to David and talking to him. There's been a few times that I've had the pleasure of speaking with him at Consensus and Swell and on other occasions. And he's always full of knowledge when it comes to the new amendments that are coming to the network and how they're going to impact Ripple's ability to scale, and then also the adoption of the network itself. So, and I always forget, please like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. It does help the algorithm and helps the channel. And I always forget to say it. So we'll jump into the question. We got Todd, he says, what are your realistic price expectations if/when the Clarity Act passes? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I believe that we're going to see price appreciation for XRP prior to the Clarity Act passing. XRP has a moat right now where it is really the only asset that sits uniquely positioned to facilitate the volume of payments that would be required for certain markets prior to that bill passing. And it's really the only blockchain that has the functionality that would allow for institutional adoption with digital identity, credentials, permission domains, and here we've got permission DEX that's going to go live in just 7 days on the 18th of February. So 7 more days and we'll have permission DEXs there. And that's the last piece of the puzzle for Ripple to really get institutional adoption for the payment component, leveraging XRP to settle those. So all that being stated, if they continue to push this out with the Clarity Act, it might be right after XRP appreciates that we see the Clarity Act passed. And then that would, again, just pour gas on the fire at that point. I feel the same way about permission DEX. Corda can already leverage XRP to settle between siloed ecosystems utilizing the Corda settler. And again, that's what Project Ion was. It was a partnership between the DTCC and R3 that was finalized in 2022, prior to XRP having clarity here in the US. So, if there's enough liquidity in XRP, then we would potentially see them start leveraging that to, get to all the things that we want to happen. But the Clarity Act is important, and institutional adoption at scale, I do think is going to require real regulations around that. I think they may strip out the DeFi component because that is really kind of the friction and the opposition that the Democrats have on the bill, but that markup passed. So they're voting on it as is. I think that if they don't get it through, they're going to have to remark it up. And then if they pull that piece out and you just give clarity to what is a security, what's a commodity, what's a currency on chain, then you will have another bill later on that has, all the DeFi components. The interesting part about the XRPL, and David Schwartz was just talking about this, again, another reason I love listening to him, is all of the TradFi lending components happen off-chain. It's just the facilitation of the credit transfer or the debit and credit that happens on the XRPL. It's very simple, right? So if you had an Oracle that could move that or transfer that on-chain, you still got to underwrite the risk on the loan. If it's not over-collateralized, which institutions need, they're always going to underwrite the risk on the loan, look at your credit score, look at your income, look at all the stuff that they do before they issue you a line of credit or a loan, whatever the collateral is that you're buying with the loan, a mortgage, a car, all that stuff. right now you can put up collateral on chain and be able to borrow against that. That's awesome. The other piece is when he was talking about the loans on the XRPL, you really can't tell how a portfolio of loans is performing right now. There's not a real easy way to do that. But with the token value that's going to be issued against those portfolios of loans, one, you'll be able to participate and put your liquidity to work in one of those portfolios on chain. And because it is a native piece of the network, there's no one counterparty that controls that, right? Like you're going to have some oversight. You'll have a broker. I think that there'll be four components to the loans on chain. You're going to have the person lending the money, so the lender. You're going to have the borrower, the person that's borrowing the money. You'll have a broker that kind of sits with oversight and does the underwriting of the risk and all of that. And then you're going to have an arbiter or somebody, if there's a lawsuit or something bad that happens and there's, an argument on what, somebody didn't repay something, there's going to need to be a component for that also. So you're going to have, it'll be four people involved. But again, a lot of that happens off chain. And really the only thing that happens on chain is the facilitation of the credit on the XRPL. And there's no counterparty risk or one centralized authority that's managing that ecosystem or earning off of it. It's the people contributing to the pool that will be getting the returns for whatever the lending rate is. So I think that, they've been very methodical and they've thought through what the easiest path to adoption is for a lot of this and remove the counterparty risk, which is what you have in a lot of these other ecosystems on other EVM chains. There's one centralized authority that runs that smart contract. It's not embedded in the network, and it's kind of derivative or sits above that. And that, again, provides counterparty risk for one other person involved in that transaction that might see one thing or another and decide to execute something. So I think, you'll have the lender or the borrower as a signer and the broker as a signer. And once the loan's repaid, they'll be able to reissue or release the collateral back if there is collateral put up. And you're going to, again, need some tokenized form of that collateral, titles, right, for real estate, for vehicles, whatever it's going to be that you're going to be purchasing. Right now, that title sits with the bank until you pay off whatever that asset is, right? So that they're able to recover that loss if there's a situation where you aren't able to make payment, you default on it, they repo your house or, whatever it is. They obviously don't want to do that because then it's a big headache for them, but that does happen. One of the things, if you are interested in real estate, something that I learned about 4 years ago is I think it's like the first or second Tuesday of each month, at least here in Texas, on the courthouse steps, they will auction off the properties that are currently in default. So, if you're trying to pick things up cheap and you want those opportunities, you can go bid against other people for those properties on that day in whatever county you're in. And that's, an opportunity post price appreciation for a lot of people. Went way off the rails there on the question, but we'll go ahead and dive back into them here. We've got Steel City Flooring Incorporated. Very cool. They say, hey, Jake, how many years or if ever do you think it will be able to buy a house in actual XRP or leverage a loan, a portion? It says lotion. It's the lotion on the skin. For one, thanks for everything that you do, and God bless you and your family. Thank you, man. I really appreciate the kind words in the super chat. So we actually are talking to a company right now that issues cross-collateralized loans for Bitcoin to be able to lend on a mortgage. And they have had a lot of interest for XRP. There are some people that are still in a position to be able to do that. The interest rate when it's cross-collateralized like that is much lower versus just borrowing against the asset itself. And they've had a lot of success with that product. I think they've done maybe a quarter $2 billion in loans. And I think that they'll continue to do well. I'm trying to think of the name. I'll have to go look at it. But we would love to see that for XRP. I think you could probably see that here in 2026. If we see some significant price appreciation, products and solutions will come to market. People will build this stuff. They're going to move where the liquidity is. We are unique in that we see the value proposition for XRP and anticipate that move in liquidity. And we've, curated a lot of these solutions prior to that appreciation where other people are going to wait. Institutions are going to wait, right? They're going to wait until Bitcoin had $1 trillion in market cap. There really wasn't a whole lot. We didn't see ETFs. We didn't see a lot of these solutions for lending against it as collateral. I mean, you could through smart contracts, but there wasn't, people with lending licenses or, the licenses to be able to actually do that. You could just do it on chain in a smart contract, wrap it on Ethereum, and then go post it as collateral over there and get the cash out in a stable coin and then convert that to fiat to be able to do the house transfer or purchase. I think you could likely see that here in 2026, which would be fantastic. And we are absolutely pushing forward on that solution. We already did this one. Again, appreciate you on the super chat there. We got Salvador. He says, hello, Jake. DWP all in. My dude. Glad to be working with you. He says, if Ripple becomes a bank, they are already a bank. They have their provisional license from the OCC as a federally chartered bank here in the U.S. And I believe they should have full clarity on that if they don't already in the very near future, past their provisional period. Same thing for Paxos, same thing for Circle, same thing for Fidelity, and then BitGo were the 5 provisionary licenses that were issued toward the end of last year. It says, could it deliver the same high value yields banks oppose in stablecoins by mirroring savings accounts as tokens and paying yields at the bank level instead? So a couple things there. Tokenized deposits are the way around stablecoins. Like, I've already had multiple conversations with banks, and they are definitely going to tokenize deposits, and they will be able to pay you a yield on that. They won't be able to pass you the yield on the stablecoin if you're holding it. At least how things sit today. If, Coinbase has their opinions on this, but I don't know that they're going to win on it. They're trying to kind of go back and change things in the Clarity Act versus how they were passed in the Genius Bill. I think that you will be able to earn a yield on the tokenized deposits. Not so sure on the stable coins. I think stable coins are going to be primarily used by institutions for their own internal settlement. Citi's stablecoin will be for their bank. Goldman's stablecoin will be for their bank. Bank of America has their own. JP Morgan has their own. These banks aren't going to want to hold the counterparty's stablecoin because they would rather issue their own and be able to hold the treasuries and generate the yield off of that, right? Like, there's an inherent value to holding your own stablecoins over somebody else's. Tokenized deposits, on the other hand, you'll be able to swap between your money market and your tokenized deposit or earn a yield on your tokenized deposit there at the bank. And if they're able to earn 2/5 more money on your money than they are today, they're going to be much more willing to pay out a yield to you to be able to aggregate more of that capital, right? But Ripple themselves, so Ripple is an enterprise B2B solution provider. They're going to deal with institutions. They're going to deal with enterprises. They do treasury management. I don't think they're ever going to have a product that's directly consumer facing. Now, that's not to say they wouldn't work with some of their counterparty to disseminate that or democratize access to it to retail or consumers. Brad actually talked about that today at XRP Community Day. He said, they're excited to work with partners to be able to create consumer-facing products, but it's not something that they themselves will be doing, even though they have the regulatory license as a federally chartered bank. They're working on institutional flows, again, enterprise payments, large value payments, back-end settlement. That's where the money is. Again, people go where the money is. Retail is not where the money is. And so that's their focus, but that's not to say that they won't work with other counterparties to get some of that stuff to market. And I am, extremely excited for that here in 2026, because I do think a lot of those solutions will be made available to retail that are holding larger amounts of XRP. All right. Again, awesome questions. I love doing these. I love coming on here on Monday and Wednesday nights and hanging out with you guys. It's a little late for some people. A lot of people listen back to these later on, but I get a kick out of it. It's it's fulfilling for me. So I appreciate y'all taking the time